All right, my name is Hunter Jones, and this is my reading of performing Porter's Five Forces analysis. Porter's five forces are the characteristics of an industry environment that have the greatest impact on the performance of the firms in that industry. The fundamental mistake that students and most people make when analyzing these forces is that they analyze them from the perspective of an individual firm. For example, they might say, the bargaining power of suppliers for PepsiCo is low because PepsiCo has many suppliers. This is incorrect. A correct version of this statement would start, the bargaining power of suppliers in the non-alcoholic beverage industry is low because ... Porter's five forces are like the weather. The weather on campus is the same for every person on campus. However, different people make different decisions to deal with the weather. Long sleeves versus short sleeves, carry an umbrella versus wear a raincoat, etc. In a similar way, although Porter's five forces are the same for every firm in an industry, different firms make different strategic decisions to equip themselves against those forces. Some firms, might source from multiple suppliers to reduce supplier power or sign customers to exclusive long-term contracts to reduce buyer power. When performing Porter 5's forces analysis on behalf of a single firm, each force must first be analyzed from perspective of the entire industry before any discussion or analysis of how that firm is equipped to deal with that force. For example, one could say the bargaining power of buyers in the non-alcoholic beverage industry is fairly strong due to the purchase volume and backward integration. However, PepsiCo's brand image and loyal customer base mitigate the power somewhat. To perform Porter's five forces analysis, identify the most relevant factors for each force and identify the direction and magnitude of the impact of those factors. If most of the impact indicates a strong force, identify the force as strong. If most of the impact indicates a weak force, identify the force as weak. If the main factors balance on each other out, then identify the force as moderate. Here are a few force-specific notes to keep in mind. Number 1, threat of new entrants. To assess the threat of new entrants, you must identify the strength of the barriers to entry. If you do not discuss barriers to entry, then you are not properly assessing this threat. If you identify the threat of new entrants as low, but there are several recent clear examples of successful entrants, you are probably doing it incorrectly and need to reassess. Remember that high barriers to entry mean a low threat of new entrants and vice versa. Second is the supplier bargaining power. In Porter's five forces analysis, suppliers are firms that sell inputs to an industry. Suppliers do not sell directly to the buyers unless suppliers are forward integrated or buyers are backward integrated. To assess supplier bargaining power, you need to identify the most important suppliers first. Then you can assess questions of the relative number of suppliers versus the number of firms in the industry. Differentiation among suppliers, forward integration by suppliers, or backward integration by industry firms, etc. And third, buyer bargaining power. In Porter's five forces analysis, buyers are direct customers that buy products or services from an industry. Suppliers do not sell directly to buyers unless suppliers are forward integrated or buyers are backward integrated. To assess buyer bargaining power, you need to identify the most important buyers first. The first mistake that most analysts make is only looking at consumers. Consumers are very often not the buyers that should be analyzed. For example, with PepsiCo, above, consumers do not buy directly from PepsiCo or any other non-alcoholic beverage manufacturer. So an analysis that looked at buyer bargaining power of consumers in the industry would be extremely flawed. The second biggest mistake made in the analyzing this force is overemphasizing of switching costs. While switching costs are relevant, the relative number of buyers compared to the number of firms in the industry and the volume of purchase by the average buyer are far the most important factors in determining buyer bargaining power. For example, in many retail industries, there are thousands or even millions of buyers, each making relatively small number of purchases each year. Retail consumers rarely have any power. Fourth, the threat of substitutes. In Porter's Five Forces analysis, substitutes refer to products or services sold by firms outside of the industry that customers could choose instead of products or services sold by the industry. Substitutes for non-alcoholic beverages and beverage industry include tap water or alcoholic beverages. For example, not different options for non-alcoholic beverages you would find at a convenience store or supermarket. Fifth, the intensity/threat of rivalry. In Porter's Five Forces analysis, rivalry refers to the intensity with which firms have to compete with each other for customers. Most students make the mistake of claiming that every industry has a strong rivalry. This is obviously not the case, or it would be pointless to discuss this force at all. The number of competitors and how easy or difficult it is for them to differentiate themselves are main factors in this force. More differentiation and brand loyalty, which follows it, means lower rivalry. The other most important factor is industry growth. If the industry is growing rapidly, this lowers rivalry. Because the firms in the industry can grow profits without taking market share from competitors. That was my reading and analysis of Porter's Five Forces analysis. Thank you.